11th sneak attack. The murderous organization behind it has put out a new propaganda videotape. It was shown today on the Arab satellite television channel Al Jazeera. On this Al-Qaeda tape are the suspected mastermind of the attack, Osama bin Laden, and some of the assassins who carried it out. Al Jazeera also says it interviewed two Al-Qaeda terrorists who it is said revealed the original plan for the attack on America. CBS News correspondent Richard Roth has the pictures and the story.
The tape, says Al Jazeera, showed up in today's mail, apparently the voice of Osama bin Laden, who's not seen, in an eerie homage to the September 11th hijackers. He calls them men who changed history, but when this was recorded isn't known. Yet it includes one of the hijackers reading what Al Jazeera calls a will praising bin Laden, and scenes ostensibly recorded in Kandahar, Afghanistan, long before the attacks on America. 4 men said to be among the hijackers, and pictures of training with flight manuals and textbooks and a map of Washington. Al Jazeera believes Al-Qaeda's marking the anniversary of the attacks, and that's why its correspondent Yusri Fuda was summoned to Karachi, Pakistan, blindfolded and led to a hideout to interview 2 of its most senior figures, both among the FBI's most wanted terrorists. Fuda says they told him Al-Qaeda's original plan didn't involve the World Trade Center. They told you the original plan was to target nuclear power stations, but they abandoned that idea.
For now, according to Khalid Sheikh Mohammed.
Why?
I don't know exactly what for now means. He says to me for now means for now.
Over 2 days last June, Fuda says Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who calls himself Al-Qaeda's military commander, and Ramzi bin al-Shibh, called the coordinator of the September 11th attacks, gave a chilling account of Al-Qaeda's aims.
They wanted to make a big bang, choose targets that would be more of symbols, and at the same time cause as many deaths as possible.
The hijacked plane that crashed in Pennsylvania, he was told, was supposed to hit the Capitol building in Washington. And around the White House, he says, Al-Qaeda had conducted reconnaissance for months before deciding it would not be a target. Fuda says he was told planning began 2.5 years before the attacks, and that each man involved knew he'd be on a suicide mission from the day he left Afghanistan. Al-Qaeda's reason for talking, Fuda assumes, was to send a message.
That they are still functioning, they are well, Al-Qaeda is there, bin Laden is there.
Yet the fact is, while all the new video fits Al-Qaeda's pattern, none of it proves if bin Laden's dead or alive. Richard Roth, CBS News, London.
No one is more interested in the terror tapes than U.S. intelligence. CBS News correspondent Jim Stewart in Washington reports what his sources are telling him about the significance of what's on these tapes. Jim?
Dan, U.S. intelligence officials have seen and heard the Al Jazeera tapes. They believe them to be authentic, and they say they appear to contain a level of detail about the September the 11th attacks that has never been reported before. For example, in the interviews, the Al-Qaeda officials claimed that planning for the attack started in early 1999, and that hijacker ringleader Mohammed Atta was first summoned to Afghanistan for his initial instructions in the summer of 1999. They also claim that Atta corresponded with Al-Qaeda operative Ramzi bin al-Shibh in Germany over the internet. Writing in German, Atta pretended to be a student writing his girlfriend, Jenny. Al-Qaeda had code words for the targets it selected. The World Trade Center was the faculty of town planning. The Pentagon was the faculty of fine arts. And Congress, the target that escaped, was the faculty of law. On his last call to Germany, Atta alerted his friend bin al-Shibh that a date for the attack had been selected, using the code words 2 sticks, a dash, and a cake with a stick down, or September the 11th. And of particular interest to U.S. investigators, the terrorists claim to have sent 4 surveillance teams to the United States to scout targets before Atta and the hijacker pilots arrived in the summer of 2000. Al-Qaeda also shot down a theory popular with some U.S. officials by repeating a claim made earlier by Osama bin Laden that all of the hijackers did know they were on a suicide mission. The men were selected from a special section of the Al-Qaeda training camps, they said, called the Department of Martyrs. There is also more than a touch of mockery in the tapes and interviews. The terrorists refer to September the 11th as Holy Tuesday. And one of the men, Ben Al-Sheeb, still has a suitcase of training material related to the attacks he calls his souvenirs. According to Al Jazeera, Ben Al-Sheeb says he has written a 112-page justification for the attacks and would like to enter it in the U.S. Library of Congress. Dan?
Jim Stewart reporting live from Washington. As for the possibility of a terror attack this September 11th, the FBI says there is no specific threat against any of the anniversary commemorations. But because of what are called general threats, the FBI is advising electric utilities and transportation agencies to be on alert. And the nation's little understood and confusing color-coded threat level remains officially at yellow, unchanged from its original designation in March. In Seattle today, an American Muslim, James Ujarma, pleaded not guilty to federal charges of trying to set up a terrorist training camp in the United States. And in Oregon, a Muslim cleric arrested yesterday at the Portland airport was arraigned on document fraud charges. A federal prosecutor also says TNT residue was found on the cleric's luggage. CBS's Jerry Bowen has more on the Pacific Northwest terror connection.
Al-Qaeda terrorists were eyeing the Pacific Northwest as a training ground and infiltration route even before 1999, when a would-be Millennium bomber tried to sneak in from Canada at the border entry in Port Angeles, Washington. Al-Qaeda-trained Ahmed Rassam had a car trunk full of explosives and was planning to bomb Los Angeles International Airport. Jurors at his federal trial were shown what just 5 pounds of the material could have done.
Since his conviction, Rassam's been held in this federal detention center in Seattle awaiting final sentencing. How much prison time he serves depends on how well he continues to perform his new role, government informer against Al-Qaeda.
Rassam is one of the only people that we've been able to capture that's actually singing like a canary. He knows some of the people, he knows bin Laden, and he was able to connect some of the dots.
Some big dots. Rassam named Abu Zubaydah, captured in Pakistan, as a top Al-Qaeda leader who ran the Afghan training camps. Rassam trained there in 1998 along with Zacharias Moussaoui, the accused 20th hijacker. And Abu Hamza has a Seattle connection. This now-defunct mosque was a temporary base for his American disciple, Muslim convert James Ujarma, who maintained an anti-American website. Today, Ujarma pled not guilty to charges he tried to set up an Al-Qaeda training camp on U.S. soil with Abu Hamza's help.
He went to Hamza and said,
who maintained an anti-American website. Now, Ujarma's under arrest and indictment for trying to set up an Al-Qaeda training camp on U.S. soil with Abu Hamza's help.
He went to Hamza and said, look, here's this training camp, or we can come up with this training camp in Oregon. Will you support it? Will you fund it? Will you be part of it? Will you bring people to this training camp?
The indictment says that in 1999, Abu Hamza sent 2 aides from London to check out this ranch in southern Oregon.
There was some people of Middle Eastern descent that were in the area at that time.
But the plan went nowhere, and in London, Abu Hamza told CBS News he had nothing to do with it.
I'm not interested about, I told you, or even have any structural link with any of the groups specifically.
But officials don't buy it and are working to indict and extradite Abu Hamza to put him on trial for trying to export Al-Qaeda terrorism to America. Jerry Bowen, CBS News, Seattle.
President Bush pressed ahead today with his campaign to convince U.S. allies that a new war is needed to oust Saddam Hussein from power in Iraq and head off the threat Saddam might build or obtain nuclear weapons. As CBS News Chief White House correspondent John Roberts reports tonight, there are signs the president is at least on a limited basis succeeding.
The initial reluctance of some U.S. allies to go to war against Iraq appears to be breaking down tonight, with momentum building toward a tough UN ultimatum to Saddam: submit to unrestricted weapons inspections or face the consequences. President Bush is working furiously to build a coalition against Iraq, since Friday consulting the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, the chiefs of the UN and NATO, the presidents of Turkey, the European Union and Egypt, and Saudi Arabia. Today, he cajoled Canada's reluctant leader in face-to-face meetings. While their public event was about border security, the broader message was unmistakable.
We realized, at least in our country, that we had become a battlefield. And And we've got to confront those threats.
The level of threat posed by Saddam is still uncertain, but a report out today from the prestigious International Institute for Strategic Studies highlights grave concerns. Iraqi designers, it says, have likely completed preparations for building a nuclear weapon, and that while it would take several years for Iraq to produce sufficient uranium for a bomb, it could be built in a matter of months if the material were obtained on the black market.
There's a very serious problem that has to be dealt with great urgency. And from that point of view, I think both the British and American administrations are absolutely right.
President Bush and his British counterpart also pointed to satellite evidence suggesting Saddam has restarted his nuclear program. His phosphorus plant in western Iraq, which also produced uranium, was leveled in the Gulf War. This satellite photo clearly shows the plant repaired, up and running. But no one can say if it's producing uranium or simply phosphorus. And the photo is almost 2 years old, again raising the issue of why taking out Saddam has suddenly become so urgent. Both the evidence and the lack of it has world leaders in a difficult position. No one wants to go to war if something short of it would do. But at the same time, no one wants to underestimate Saddam's capabilities and intentions either. Dan?
Live from the White House, John Roberts. In the Middle East today, Yasser Arafat called for an end to, and I quote directly, 50 years of struggle and bloodshed. Speaking to the Palestinian parliament, Arafat condemned attacks on Israeli civilians. But the U.S. Embassy said Arafat must be judged by actions, not words. Earlier in the Gaza Strip, Israeli troops blew up a suspected bomb factory and what they called the home of a Palestinian militant. Still ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, not all military heroes wear uniforms. Tonight, hear for the first time how they kept the Pentagon from shutting down on 9/11, the day that changed America. New York City police officers who died at the World Trade Center. The granite wall is dedicated to all NYPD officers who've fallen in the line of duty. Families received copies of their shields. The badge numbers now retired for all time. Coming up here on the CBS Evening News, 9/11. With the Pentagon in flames, America's security depended on a few brave men in a smoke-filled basement.
And at the same time, you're sitting there trying to breathe.
Attack on America, the headquarters of the U.S. military, the Pentagon, is fully rebuilt. Exterior signs of the devastation are gone, save for a single fire-blackened stone engraved with the date of the attack. But as CBS's national security correspondent David Martin reports, the story might very well have been different if not for the courage of a few unsung heroes of 9/11.
As horrific as it looked, as deadly as it was, the attack on the Pentagon did not shut the building down. Military command centers remained in operation all through that day, and the next day the building was open for business.
Only now are we learning just how close the Pentagon came to having to be abandoned that day. It all happened in the first hour when a handful of maintenance workers saved the building from a meltdown.
Steve Carter, the assistant building manager, felt a jolt and watched the screens in his operations center turn red as hundreds of fire alarms went off at once.
When you sit there and you look at a whole side of a building this size basically erupt into a fire, there's an unbelievability. You know, you're just looking at it going, we must have got hit with a bomb.
Over at the heating and refrigeration plant, Don Cooney saw something he couldn't believe either. The building's water pressure was plummeting.
It's normally around 90, 95 pounds pressure. It was 18 pounds. Okay, that's not good.
The plane had severed water mains and the Pentagon was losing its lifeblood. Without water, there would be no way to fight the fire. Without water, there would be no air conditioning in the rest of the building, and the computers and electronic equipment in the military command centers would quickly overheat and crash.
We're talking about whether the headquarters of the United States military can keep functioning in the hours after the United States has been attacked.
Yes.
Faced with an out-of-control fire and the threat of a massive computer meltdown, Cooney called Steve Carter.
My message to Steve was, Steve, I'm about ready to lose the plant. I need somebody to get inside and shut the valves in the basement of the Pentagon.
Stop the hemorrhage of the water.
Exactly.
Carter headed down into the basement.
The smoke was getting heavier. As we came into here, it was really caustic and it was almost choking. You could not draw it into your mouth.
Did you have any breathing apparatus on?
No.
Fighting through smoke, fighting to keep the Pentagon alive.
So we got these valves As you can see, they're quite sizable. And at the same time, you're sitting there trying to breathe through the armpit of your coat and operate the valves. You couldn't breathe.
So you think about this huge building, largest office building in the world and all that, and saving it comes down to one valve here in the basement.
Without closing these valves, all the chill water continues to pour. The firefighting water can't build up pressure. They would have to bring in the water by tanker.
And all the electronics that we use.
And all the electronics would be gone.
The race to save the water had been won, but the battle to save the Pentagon was not over. Tomorrow we'll tell you how Steve Carter and his blue-collar warriors kept the fire from forcing the military to abandon its headquarters. David Martin, CBS News, the Pentagon.
A reminder that CBS News will have what we hope will turn out to be restrained, reasonable, responsible special coverage of the 9/11 anniversary throughout this week here on the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. We invite you to join us again tomorrow. Good night.
For news 24 hours a day, go to cbsnews.com. AOL keyword CBS News.